The smell of burnt coffee and disappointment hung in the air of Parish Electrical's warehouse office like a bad marriage. I sat behind my metal desk, counting invoices and wondering when exactly my life had turned into a country song without the truck or the dog. "Nick, you listening to me?" Carl Martinez, my foreman, stood in the doorway holding a clipboard and wearing that look he got when the crew found another contractor's hack job behind the walls. Always Carl. "You're more reliable than my alarm clock and twice as loud." I set down the stack of unpaid invoices from Hartwell Construction. 3 months overdue, 28 grand. "What's the damage this time?" "Johnson site. They want us to rewire the entire second floor. Again." Carl dropped into the plastic chair across from my desk. "That's the 3rd change order this month. I'm starting to think they don't know a ground wire from a garden hose." I laughed, but it came out hollow. Everything felt hollow these days. "Bill them for it. Triple rate for stupidity tax." "Speaking of billing," Carl's voice dropped. "Your brother's been signing off on some weird expenses lately. Jewelry store charges on the business card, fancy restaurant bills. You know anything about that?" My stomach clenched like I'd grabbed a live wire. John Parrish, my older brother and business partner, had always lived large, but jewelry stores? "How much we talking?" "9.5 grand last month alone, all approved with your signature." Carl slid the credit card statement across my desk. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. My signature, but I'd never seen these charges before. Tiffany Co. Morton's Steakhouse, the Ritz-Carlton, all dated when I was out of town on the Henderson job. "Carl, I never signed these." "I figured." "Your handwriting's worse than a doctor's prescription pad. These look too clean." He leaned back, studying my face. "You want me to dig deeper?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Beth, my wife of 16 years. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Working late. Right." Beth hadn't worked outside our home since our youngest daughter, Bree, was born 13 years ago. Unless you counted her new hobby of finding herself at yoga classes that apparently ran until midnight. "Yeah, Carl. Dig deeper. But keep it quiet for now." After Carl left, I sat alone in the warehouse, listening to the fluorescent lights hum their electric lullaby. The business my father built, that John and I had grown into the biggest electrical contractor in 3 counties, suddenly felt like a house of cards in a windstorm. My phone rang. John's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, little brother. How's the salt mine treating you?" John's voice had that smooth quality that made clients trust him with their checkbooks, and apparently made my wife trust him with God knows what else. At 42, he was 3 years older than me, and had never let me forget it. "Could be better. We need to talk about some expense reports." "Boring stuff, Nick. That's why you handle the books, and I handle the people. Speaking of which, I'm taking the Hartwell crew out for drinks tonight. Team building." "Without me? You hate that social stuff. Besides, someone needs to hold down the fort." The line crackled. "Oh, and Nick? Beth mentioned you two had a fight about money. Maybe ease up on the penny pinching, huh? Happy wife, happy life." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, pieces clicking together like components in a circuit diagram. John's mysterious expenses, Beth's late nights, the way they both seemed to know things about my marriage that I didn't. The warehouse felt colder suddenly, despite the space heaters humming in the corners. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, but stopped when I saw a car pulling into the lot, a silver BMW I didn't recognize. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Claire Morrison, Beth's best friend since college. Claire was the kind of woman who knew everyone's business and treated gossip like currency. She spotted me through the window and waved, her smile too bright, too forced. "Nick." Perfect timing. I was hoping to catch you. "Claire, what brings you to the warehouse?" I opened the door, letting in the October chill. "Oh, I was in the neighborhood." She stepped inside, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Beth. My pulse quickened. What about her? Claire's smile faltered slightly. Well, it's probably nothing, but some of the girls in our book club have been talking. They've seen her around town with... She paused, wrapping her coat tighter. With John. A lot. They're family, Claire. We all spend time together. I know. It's just... She bit her lip, a gesture that looked practiced. They seemed very close at Marcello's last week, holding hands across the table. Beth was wearing this gorgeous bracelet I'd never seen before. The warehouse started spinning slightly. What kind of bracelet? Diamond tennis bracelet. Must have cost a fortune. She said it was a gift, but when I asked from who, she just smiled and changed the subject. $9,500. Tiffany Company. Thanks for telling me, Claire. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I'm probably just being paranoid. You know how I get. She headed for the door, then turned back. But Nick, if there's anything going on, you deserve to know. After she left, I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, engine running, heat blasting, trying to process what felt like a complete rewiring of my reality. Beth and John. My wife and my brother. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing I'd been blind to it. All those late nights Beth claimed to be at yoga or book club, John's sudden interest in team building without me. The way they'd exchange looks across the dinner table during family gatherings, like they shared secrets I wasn't privy to. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our family photos. Beth's smile looked different now, like she was looking past me toward something better. Someone better. My phone buzzed with another text from Beth. Staying at Claire's tonight. Girl talk. But Claire had just left my warehouse, heading in the opposite direction of her house. I started the truck and drove home to our empty house, where my daughters Beau and Bree were probably doing homework and wondering why their parents had turned into strangers who happened to share an address. The house felt like a museum of a marriage that had died without anyone bothering to tell me. Beth's coffee cup from this morning still sat in the sink. Her romance novel lay open on the kitchen counter, bookmark placed at a chapter titled Forbidden Desires. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and opened Beth's jewelry box. There, nestled in black velvet, was the most beautiful diamond tennis bracelet I'd ever seen. The price tag was still attached, $9,500. My signature was on the receipt, but I'd never been inside a Tiffany store in my life. The next morning hit me like a bucket of ice water mixed with regret. I'd spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around me like a coffin finding its final shape. Beth came home at 7 a.m., looking perfectly put together in a way that suggested she'd had access to a shower and mirror that wasn't ours. She found me in the kitchen, holding the bracelet receipt like evidence in a murder trial. We need to talk, I said. She poured herself coffee, her movements deliberate and calm. About what? About this. I held up the receipt. About $9,000 charged to our business account for jewelry I never bought. Beth's face didn't change. If anything, she looked relieved, like a poker player finally ready to show her cards. I was wondering when you'd find that. So, you're not denying it? Why would I? It's beautiful, isn't it? She touched the bracelet on her wrist, the diamonds catching the morning light. A woman deserves nice things, Nick. Especially when her husband's too busy counting pennies to notice she exists. The casual cruelty of it hit me harder than a slap. I work 60-hour weeks to keep this family comfortable. Comfortable? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. When's the last time we went anywhere together? When's the last time you looked at me like I was more than just another expense to manage? When's the last time you looked at me like I was more than just a paycheck? She set down her coffee cup with a sharp click. Maybe that's all you are now. The words hung between us like a live wire, dangerous and crackling with energy. I'd expected tears, denials, explanations. I hadn't expected this cold honesty. "So what now?" I asked. "Now you decide what kind of man you want to be." Beth picked up her purse, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "You can keep being the same boring, predictable Nick who thinks love is paying bills on time. Or you can fight for what you want." "And if I choose to fight?" She smiled, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 20 years ago. "Then maybe you'll surprise me." After she left, I sat in the kitchen until the coffee grew cold, trying to decode what had just happened. Beth hadn't denied the affair. She'd practically confirmed it. But she'd also thrown down a gauntlet, challenging me to become someone different. The problem was, I wasn't sure I knew how. My phone rang, John's name on the screen. "Morning, little brother." "Rough night? You look like hell." I looked around the empty kitchen. "How would you know how I look?" "Beth mentioned you two had a heart-to-heart. She's worried about you." "I'll bet she is." I grabbed my keys and jacket. "We need to meet. Office. Now." "Can't." "I'm showing the Morrison project to potential investors. Big money, Nick. The kind that could set us up for life. The Morrison project. Claire Morrison's husband had hired us to wire his new office complex. Another connection I'd been too blind to see. This can't wait, John. Everything can wait for the right price. Trust me on this one." He hung up, leaving me with the dial tone and a growing certainty that trust was the last thing I should be offering my brother. I drove to the warehouse through morning traffic, my mind racing through possibilities like current through a circuit board. Every scenario led to the same conclusion. I was being played by the two people I'd trusted most. Carl was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his pickup truck with 2 cups of gas station coffee and a manila folder thick with papers. "You look like you stuck your finger in a light socket," he said, handing me a coffee. "Feels about right. What did you find?" Carl opened the folder, revealing credit card statements, receipts, and what looked like photographs. "Your brother's been busy. 3 months of charges to restaurants, hotels, jewelry stores. Always when you were out of town on jobs." He handed me a photograph. John and Beth sitting in a restaurant booth, her hand covering his across the table. The timestamp showed last Tuesday when Beth had told me she was at book club. "Where did you get this?" "My cousin Raul works security at Marcello's. He's been wondering why your wife and brother were acting like teenagers on a first date." Carl flipped through more photos. There's more. Hotel receipts. Parking garage footage. They've been meeting for at least 4 months. 4 months. While I'd been working double shifts to land the Henderson contract, my wife and brother had been playing house with my money. "There's something else," Carl said. "I talked to Danny at First National. John's been asking about transferring business accounts, something about restructuring for tax purposes. He can't do that without my signature. He can if he's got power of attorney, which, according to these papers..." Carl pulled out a legal document. "He does." I stared at my signature on the power of attorney form. Another document I'd never signed, but the handwriting looked perfect. Too perfect. "They're planning to clean me out," I said. "Looks that way. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before I could answer, John's BMW pulled into the parking lot. He climbed out wearing a $1,000 suit and a smile that could sell ice to penguins. Everything about him screamed success, from his perfectly styled hair to his Italian leather shoes. "Nick! Carl! Beautiful morning, isn't it?" He walked over like he owned the world, which apparently he was planning to. "We need to talk," I said, "about some financial irregularities." John's smile never wavered. "Irregularities? That's a big word for you, little brother." Carl stepped forward. "Maybe we should take this inside." "No need." John's voice carried that smooth confidence that had always made me feel like the younger, dumber brother. Nick's just having some trust issues. Happens to insecure men sometimes. The word insecure hit me like a physical blow. It was the same word Beth had used during our fights, the same accusation that had been eating at me for months. Insecure about what exactly? About everything. Your marriage, your business, your ability to satisfy a woman like Beth. John stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. Face it, Nick. You're a 40-year-old electrician who peaked in high school. Beth deserves better. Something snapped inside me like an overloaded circuit. 20 years of being the responsible brother, the steady husband, the reliable partner, and this was my reward. I grabbed John by his perfect lapels and slammed him against his BMW hard enough to set off the car alarm. You son of a bastard, I growled. John didn't struggle. If anything, he looked pleased. There's the fire I was looking for. Too bad it's about 20 years too late. Carl grabbed my shoulders, pulling me back before I could do something stupid. Nick, let it go. He's not worth it. But as I released John's jacket, I saw something in his eyes that chilled me more than his words. He wasn't angry or scared. He was satisfied, like he'd just confirmed something he'd suspected all along. Feel better? John straightened his suit, brushing off imaginary dust. Because that little tantrum just cost you everything. He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. He'd been recording the entire confrontation. Assault and battery, witnessed by your own employee. I think that voids our partnership agreement, don't you? John's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Beth was right. You really are predictable. He got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with the taste of my own stupidity in my mouth. Boss, Carl said quietly. We need a new plan. That evening, I sat in Murphy's Tavern nursing a beer and trying to figure out how my life had become a country song without the redemption arc. The bar was nearly empty except for a few regulars and the ghosts of better decisions. Murphy's was the kind of place where electricians, plumbers, and construction workers came to complain about customers, weather, and wives who didn't understand that sometimes a man needed to drink his problems instead of talking about them. I was on my second beer when the door opened and my former life walked in. Tom Bradley and Mike Stevens had been my best friends since high school. We'd played football together, chased girls together, and stood up in each other's weddings. Tom owned Bradley Plumbing, and Mike ran a successful HVAC business. Together, we'd formed an informal network of contractors who threw work to each other and covered each other's backs. Until today, apparently. They spotted me at the bar and walked over with the careful expressions of men approaching a wounded animal. Nick, Tom said, sliding onto the stool next to me. We heard about what happened this morning. Good news travels fast. I took another sip of beer. Let me guess. John called you. Mike sat on my other side, effectively trapping me between them. He's worried about you, man. Says you've been under a lot of stress. Stress. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Is that what we're calling it when your wife and brother steal your business? Tom and Mike exchanged glances over my head. The kind of look that said they'd already discussed this and reached a conclusion I wasn't going to like. John showed us the video, Tom said carefully. You attacking him in the parking lot. That's not like you, Nick. You're right. The old Nick would have let him screw me over quietly. Maybe I'm evolving. Or maybe you're having some kind of breakdown, Mike said. Look, we've all been there. Marriage gets tough, business gets complicated, but you can't go around assaulting people. I set down my beer and turned to face them. Did John mention why I was angry? Did he tell you about the forged signatures? The stolen money? The affair with my wife? Another exchange of glances. Tom cleared his throat. He said you've been paranoid lately. Making accusations. Beth's concerned about your mental state. Beth's concerned. I felt something cold settle in my chest. When did you talk to Beth? She called me this afternoon, Mike said. Asked if we'd noticed any changes in your behavior. She's scared, Nick, scared of what you might do. The pieces clicked together with mechanical precision. John and Beth hadn't just stolen my money and my marriage. They'd stolen my friends, turning them into unwitting allies in whatever game they were playing. So you believe them? We believe you need help, Tom said. Professional help. Someone to talk to about these conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories. 20 years of friendship reduced to mental illness because I'd caught my wife and brother with their hands in the cookie jar. And if I don't get help? Mike's jaw tightened. Then we can't keep doing business together. I've got a reputation to protect. Can't be associated with someone who's... He trailed off. Someone who's what? Unstable, Tom finished. Look, we care about you, but we've got families to think about, businesses to protect. I stood up, leaving a 20 on the bar. I understand. You've got to look out for yourselves. Nick, don't be like that, Mike called as I headed for the door. I stopped and turned back. Tell me something. If someone was screwing you over, stealing from you, destroying your life, what would you do? I'd handle it legally, through proper channels. And if the proper channels were controlled by the people screwing you over? Tom shrugged. Then I'd accept that maybe I was wrong about what was happening. I left them at the bar, probably already planning how to distance themselves from the crazy electrician who'd lost his mind over a midlife crisis. The drive home took me past John's condo complex, and I found myself pulling into the parking lot. His BMW sat under a streetlight, pristine and perfect, like everything else in his life. I sat in my truck, engine running, trying to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The old Nick would have driven home, maybe had another beer, definitely felt sorry for himself. But the old Nick had been a fool. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. If you want proof, meet me at Denny's on 5th Street. Booth in the back. Come alone. I stared at the message, wondering if this was another trap, or maybe the first piece of good luck I'd had in months. 20 minutes later, I was sliding into a cracked vinyl booth across from Danny Reeves, a teller from First National Bank who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. You came, he said, stirring sugar into coffee that probably didn't need it. You said you had proof. Danny glanced around the nearly empty restaurant, then pulled a manila envelope from his jacket. I could lose my job for this, probably go to jail. Then why are you doing it? Because your brother's a smug bastard who treats people like they're beneath him. Danny's hands shook slightly as he opened the envelope. And because what he's doing to you isn't right. Inside were photocopies of bank documents, loan applications, and account transfers, all bearing my forged signature. He's been practicing, Danny said. Started small, just signing for petty cash. But the handwriting's gotten better. Almost perfect. I studied the progression of signatures. Early ones were obviously fake, but the recent documents looked like I'd signed them myself. There's more. He applied for a business loan using your credit and the company as collateral. $200,000. For what? New equipment, he said. Expansion. But the money went into a personal account he opened in the Cayman Islands. Danny pulled out more papers. He's planning to default on the loan and let the bank seize Parish Electrical. Then he'll buy it back through a shell company for pennies on the dollar. The scope of it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just an affair or even simple theft. This was the complete destruction of everything I'd worked for, planned with surgical precision. How long do I have? The loan comes due in 30 days. If you can't pay... Danny shrugged. The bank takes everything. I gathered up the papers, my mind already working through possibilities. Danny, I need you to do something for me. I've already done too much. One more thing. Then we're even. He listened to my plan, his eyes growing wider with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Sometimes there's not much difference. As I drove home through empty streets, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the passive hope of a man waiting for things to get better, but the active hope of someone ready to make them better. The old Nick was gone. Time to see what the new one was capable of. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years and drove to downtown to see my lawyer, Patricia Wong. Pat had handled my father's estate and helped set up the business partnership with John. She was smart, ruthless, and expensive enough to make it hurt. "Nick," she said, gesturing me into her office, "you look terrible." "Thanks." That's exactly what a man wants to hear from his attorney. Pat's office was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate opposing counsel and impress clients. I'd always felt out of place there, like a mechanic in a museum, but today the sharp edges felt appropriate. "What can I do for you?" I spread Danny's documents across her mahogany desk. "I need to know my options." Pat studied the papers with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. Her expression grew darker with each page. "This is extensive fraud," she said finally. "Your brother's been planning this for months. Can we stop it? Legally?" "It's complicated. He's got power of attorney, which gives him broad authority to act on your behalf. The signatures look authentic, and proving forgery would require expensive handwriting analysis and expert testimony." "What about the bank records? The offshore accounts?" "Circumstantial. A good lawyer could argue he was protecting company assets from your increasingly erratic behavior." Pat leaned back in her chair. "Speaking of which, I heard about the incident in your parking lot." Word traveled fast in a small business community. "He provoked me." "Doesn't matter. He's got video evidence of you assaulting him. That supports his narrative that you're unstable and possibly dangerous." I felt the walls closing in around me. "So they win?" "Not necessarily. But we'd need to be smart about this. Strategic." Pat pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "First, we file an emergency injunction to freeze all business accounts. That stops him from moving more money. He'll fight it." "Of course he will, but it buys us time to build a case. Meanwhile, you need to document everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every interaction with your wife and brother." "My wife's in on it." Pat's pen stopped moving. "You're sure?" "She's been helping him forge my signature, probably feeding him information about my schedule, my habits, my weaknesses. That changes things. If we can prove she's an active participant in the fraud." Pat made more notes. "We might be able to use that in divorce proceedings. Adultery's one thing, but criminal conspiracy is another." I left Pat's office with a plan and a retainer bill that would max out my personal credit card. But for the first time in days, I felt like I was fighting back instead of just taking punches. My next stop was Carl's house, a modest ranch in a neighborhood where people still waved to their neighbors and kids played in front yards without supervision. Carl answered the door in coveralls, a beer in his hand despite it being barely noon. "Boss, figured you'd show up eventually." He stepped aside to let me in. "Beer?" "Thanks." Carl's living room was comfortable in the way that only came from years of not caring what other people thought. Mismatched furniture, family photos covering every surface, and the kind of peace that came from knowing exactly who you were. "I need your help," I said. "Figured that too." "What kind of help we talking about?" I outlined my plan, watching Carl's expression shift from concern to admiration to something that might have been fear. "That's either brilliant or completely crazy," he said when I finished. "Someone else said the same thing yesterday." "Well, crazy's worked out pretty well for you so far." Carl finished his beer and set the bottle on a coaster shaped like a wrench. "What do you need from me?" "Access to the warehouse after hours, and someone I can trust to watch my back." "You got it. But boss?" Carl's expression grew serious. "Once we do this, there's no going back. You understand that? There's already no going back. They made sure of that when they decided to destroy my life." That evening, I sat in my truck across the street from Marcello's, watching John and Beth through the restaurant window. They looked like any other couple enjoying dinner together, laughing at private jokes and touching hands across the table. Beth wore a dress I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than most people made in a week. John had traded his business suit for expensive casual wear that screamed money and success. They looked happy, content, like people who'd solved a problem that had been bothering them for a long time. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "Having dinner with Claire. Don't wait up." I took a photo of them through the window and sent it back with a single word: liar. My phone rang immediately. "Nick, I can explain." Beth's voice was tight with panic. "No need." "I understand perfectly." "It's not what it looks like. It looks like my wife having dinner with my brother while lying to me about it." What else could it be? Through the window, I watched Beth's face change as she realized the game was over. She said something to John, who turned to look out at the street. Even at this distance, I could see his smile. "Come inside," Beth said. "Let's talk like adults." "I'm done talking." I hung up and drove away, leaving them to wonder what I might do next. The uncertainty would eat at them, make them sloppy. People made mistakes when they were scared, and I was counting on them making a big one. Back at the warehouse, Carl was waiting with a thermos of coffee and a grim expression. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I'm sure about a lot of things now. Sure that my wife and brother are thieves. Sure that my friends would rather believe I'm crazy than admit they're wrong. Sure that playing by the rules just gets you screwed." Carl nodded slowly. "Then let's get to work." We spent the next 3 hours going through every file, every computer record, every piece of paper that might contain evidence of John's fraud. By the time we finished, we had enough documentation to bury him in court, if we could get it there before he buried me first. "What now?" Carl asked. "Now we wait. And we watch, and when they make their move." I smiled for the first time in days. "We'll be ready." Outside, the October wind rattled the warehouse windows like the sound of change coming whether we wanted it or not. The emergency injunction hearing was scheduled for Friday morning at 9 a.m. I spent Thursday night going over my testimony with Pat, rehearsing answers to questions we knew John's lawyer would ask. "Remember," Pat said, "stick to the facts. Don't let them provoke you into an emotional response. The judge needs to see you as the stable, responsible business owner, not the jealous husband. What if they bring up the parking lot incident? They will. We'll acknowledge it was a mistake made under extreme stress. Everyone's entitled to one moment of poor judgment when they discover their life's being stolen." Friday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of drizzle that made everything look like a noir movie. I wore my best suit, the one I'd gotten married in, and tried to look like a man who deserved justice instead of one who wanted revenge. The courthouse was busier than I'd expected, full of people whose lives had gone wrong in various legal ways. Divorce proceedings, custody battles, business disputes, the American dream being dissected by lawyers and judges who'd seen it all before. John arrived with his attorney, Marcus Webb, a man who looked like he charged by the syllable and won by intimidation. They were followed by Beth, who dressed like a grieving widow in black and pearls. "She's here to support John," Pat murmured. "Playing the concerned sister-in-law worried about your mental state. How thoughtful of her." Judge Patricia Martinez called our case, and we approached the bench like gunfighters in a western. John's side looked confident, prepared. We looked like we were hoping for a miracle. Pat presented our evidence methodically: the forged signatures, the mysterious transfers, the offshore accounts. She painted a picture of systematic fraud designed to steal a family business built over decades. Marcus Webb countered with John's version: a concerned brother trying to protect company assets from his increasingly unstable partner. He presented the video of our parking lot confrontation, character witnesses who testified to my recent unpredictable behavior, and medical records showing I'd been prescribed antidepressants after my father's passing 2 years earlier. Your Honor, Webb said in closing, we're dealing with a man in the grip of a severe mental health crisis. Mr. Jonathan Parrish has been trying to hold the business together while his brother spirals into paranoid delusions about non-existent conspiracies. When it was my turn to testify, I kept Pat's advice in mind and stuck to facts. Yes, I'd been under stress. Yes, I'd made mistakes. But the evidence spoke for itself. Money had been stolen, signatures had been forged, and my brother had systematically worked to destroy everything our father had built. Mr. Parrish, Webb said during cross-examination, isn't it true that you've been having marital problems? Yes. And isn't it true that you blame your brother for those problems? I looked at Beth, sitting in the gallery with tears in her eyes that probably looked real to everyone except me. I blame my brother for stealing from our company. My marriage problems are separate. Are they? Isn't it true that you've accused Mr. Jonathan Parrish of having an affair with your wife? Pat objected, but the damage was done. The courtroom now knew this was about more than money. Yes, I said, because he is. Webb smiled like I'd just handed him the case. And you have proof of this alleged affair? I thought about the photos Carl's cousin had taken, the hotel receipts, the restaurant surveillance footage. All circumstantial, all explainable. I'm working on it. So, no proof. Just the paranoid suspicions of a man whose marriage is failing and who needs someone to blame. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Judge Martinez took a recess to consider the evidence, leaving both sides to wait in the hallway like medical students waiting for test results. How do you think it went? I asked Pat. Hard to say. The financial evidence is strong, but the video hurts us. And bringing up the affair without solid proof made you look vindictive. Beth approached while we were talking, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer. Nick, can we talk privately? Pat started to object, but I waved her off. It's okay. Beth led me to a quiet corner near the windows overlooking the parking lot. In the gray light, she looked older than her 37 years, worn down by secrets and lies. This has gone far enough, she said. Has it? Because from where I'm standing, it's just getting started. You're going to lose everything. The business, the house, custody of the girls. Is your pride really worth all that? My pride, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. This isn't about pride, Beth. This is about you and John stealing my life. We never meant for it to happen this way. Which part? The affair or the fraud? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Both. So it's true, all of it. John loves me. He always has, even when we were kids. But you were the responsible one, the safe choice. I married you because I thought that's what I wanted. And now? Now I want to be happy. Is that so wrong? Before I could answer, the bailiff called us back into the courtroom. Judge Martinez had made her decision. After reviewing the evidence, she said, I find sufficient cause for concern about the management of Parrish Electrical. However, I also find insufficient evidence of criminal fraud at this time. My heart sank. Therefore, I'm ordering a temporary freeze on all business accounts pending a full financial audit. Mr. Jonathan Parrish will retain his position as president, but all major decisions must be approved by both partners. Mr. Nicholas Parrish, you will undergo a psychological evaluation to determine your fitness for business decisions. It was a draw that felt like a loss. John kept control of the company, but couldn't access the money. I kept my partnership, but had to prove I wasn't crazy. As we filed out of the courtroom, John caught up to me in the hallway. Good game, little brother. But this is just the first quarter. Game's not over yet. Isn't it? John's smile was sharp as a blade. You've got no money, no friends, and soon no family. What exactly are you going to fight me with? I thought about Danny's documents, Carl's loyalty, and the plan we'd put in motion while John was busy playing lawyer. Guess you'll find out. That afternoon, while John and Beth celebrated their legal victory at an expensive restaurant, Carl and I were in the warehouse implementing phase 2 of our strategy. "You sure this is legal?" Carl asked, watching me install hidden cameras throughout the office. "Perfectly legal. I own half this business, remember? I'm just protecting my investment." "And if they find them?" "They won't. These are the same cameras we use for security installations. Professional grade, nearly invisible. By evening, we had the entire office wired for sound and video. Every conversation, every meeting, every private moment would be recorded and stored on servers John didn't know existed. "Now what?" Carl asked. "Now we wait for them to hang themselves." I didn't have to wait long. The psychological evaluation was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Dr. Sarah Chen, a court-appointed psychiatrist, spent 2 hours asking me about my childhood, my marriage, my relationship with John, and my recent behavior. "Tell me about the incident in the parking lot," she said. "I lost my temper. It was stupid and unprofessional, but I'm not sorry it happened." "Why not?" "Because sometimes the only way to get someone's attention is to show them you're not going to be pushed around anymore." Dr. Chen made notes in a file that would determine whether I kept my business or lost everything. "Do you believe your wife is having an affair with your brother?" "I know she is." "How do you know?" I told her about the photographs, the receipts, the lies, and the forged signatures. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking for clarification or details. "That must be very painful," she said when I finished. "The betrayal hurts. But the assumption that I'm crazy for noticing it hurts worse." "Are you planning to hurt anyone?" "Only their bank accounts and their reputations." Dr. Chen smiled slightly. "That's probably the most honest answer I've heard in this office." The evaluation report wouldn't be ready for a week, giving me time to watch the surveillance footage from the warehouse. John and Beth met there every afternoon after the office closed, using my desk to plan my destruction. "The audit starts Monday," John said on Thursday's recording. "We need to move the Cayman money before they find it." "Can we do that without Nick knowing?" Beth asked. "Nick's not as smart as he thinks he is. He's so focused on proving we're having an affair, he's not paying attention to the real game." "What if he finds out?" John laughed. "Then we accelerate the timeline. The loan comes due in 2 weeks. If Parish Electrical defaults, the bank seizes everything. I buy it back through the shell company, and Nick gets nothing." "What about the girls?" "They'll understand eventually. Kids are resilient." I watched my wife and brother plan to steal my daughter's inheritance with the casual indifference of people discussing the weather. The old Nick would have been devastated. The new Nick was just angry. On Friday, I called Danny at the bank. "I need that favor now," I said. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that makes sure justice gets served." That evening, I invited Tom and Mike to Murphy's Tavern for what I told them would be my goodbye drink. They came reluctantly, probably expecting another paranoid rant about conspiracies and betrayal. "Gentlemen," I said, raising my beer, "to friendship." "Nick," Tom started, "we want you to know that you think I'm crazy. I know. That's why I brought these." I slid a tablet across the table and pressed play on the surveillance video. Tom and Mike watched in silence as John and Beth discussed stealing my business, moving money to offshore accounts, and manipulating the legal system to destroy me. "Jesus Christ," Mike whispered. "There's more." I showed them the forged documents, the bank records, the photographs of John and Beth together. "Everything I told you was true." Tom looked sick. "Nick, we're sorry. We had no idea." "Yes, you did. You just chose not to believe it because believing it would have been inconvenient." "What are you going to do?" Mike asked. "What I should have done from the beginning, fight back." Monday morning, the court-appointed auditor arrived at Parish Electrical to begin examining our books. John greeted him with coffee and charm, playing the role of the responsible business owner dealing with his unstable partner. What John didn't know was that Danny had already alerted federal investigators about the offshore accounts and suspicious transfers. While the auditor reviewed our legitimate books, FBI agents were tracing the money John thought he'd hidden. Tuesday afternoon, Dr. Chen released her evaluation report. I was mentally competent, emotionally stable, and fully capable of making business decisions. The stress-related behavior was a normal response to discovering extensive fraud and betrayal. John's lawyer immediately filed an appeal, but it was too late. The momentum had shifted. Wednesday morning, federal agents arrived at the warehouse with search warrants and handcuffs. I was in the office when they came through the door, badges out, faces grim. John was on the phone with a client, probably promising work he'd never have to deliver. "Jonathan Parrish, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit theft." John's face went white as they cuffed him. "This is a mistake. I want my lawyer." "You'll need one," the lead agent said. "We've got your offshore accounts, your forged documents, and about 6 hours of surveillance video showing you planning to defraud your business partner." As they led John away, he looked at me with something like respect. "I underestimated you, little brother." Most people do. Beth was arrested at home an hour later. The charges included conspiracy, fraud, and identity theft. Her bail was set at $50,000, money she didn't have access to since all the accounts were frozen. That evening, I sat in the warehouse office going through the wreckage of my life. The business would survive, probably even prosper once the legal issues were resolved. My marriage was over, but it had been over for months without me realizing it. Tom and Mike stopped by around 7, bringing beer and apologies. "We should have believed you," Tom said. "You believed what made sense at the time." John and Beth put on a good show. "What happens now?" Mike asked. "Now I rebuild. The business, my relationship with my daughters, my faith in people who deserve it." And John and Beth? I thought about them sitting in jail cells, probably still believing they were the victims of circumstances beyond their control. They'll get what they deserve. The justice system might be slow, but it's thorough. 6 months later, John pled guilty to federal fraud charges and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Beth received 2 years for her role in the conspiracy. The business accounts were unfrozen, and I bought out John's share with money recovered from the Cayman accounts. Parrish Electrical was stronger than ever, with Carl as my new partner and contracts from clients who respected our integrity. Tom and Mike threw work our way when they could, trying to make up for their earlier betrayal. My daughters chose to live with me full-time, having seen their mother's true character during the trial. They were angry and hurt, but kids really are resilient, and we were building something better from the ruins of what came before. I never remarried, never felt the need to. Trust, once broken so completely, was hard to rebuild. But I had my work, my daughters, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd fought for what mattered and won. On quiet evenings in the warehouse, I sometimes thought about the man I'd been before all this started. The trusting husband, the loyal brother, the reliable friend who never made waves or asked hard questions. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder but more honest. Someone who understood that sometimes the only way to get justice was to take it yourself. The old Nick would have been ashamed of what I'd become. The new Nick didn't give a damn.